Okay, this is a video on how to make some animation in Photoshop. We're going to build a banner ad real quick. I gave you the attached movie so that you could play that a couple times to see which we're going to try to do. But we're going to create an effect here called a parallax 2.5D, which is going to mean that the background and the foreground move at different speeds. This is popping up on things like Instagram and Facebook, where people are kind of tired if they just have a boring photograph to every once in a while mix it up and to turn something into kind of a short video that would play or autoplay on either one of those platforms. So again, I also gave you links for cinemagraphs, which is what you do to cut a movie apart, and a parallax 2.5D, which is what you do when all you have is a photograph. So I'm going to play the video real quick. So again, to go back and take a look, we are going to go ahead and start off with the parallax 2.5D effect. She's going to get bigger and the background's going to shrink around her. We're then going to fade in this green box, and we're going to add at two different time places, basically our headline, and this is our text. Then we're going to keep moving along, and as those start to fade out, she's going to slide all the way on over to the left. We're going to enter the logo. Yep, it's too big, but we're not going to do anything about that. And then we're going to pop in a box that says book a lesson, and then we're going to also make the box flicker a little bit just to draw attention to it, and then it's going to stop. So this entire process means we're going to make a banner ad that would take 8 seconds to run through. 6 to 8 seconds is kind of standard for something that's pretty short. So let's go ahead and get started. To do this, we're going to use Photoshop. We're going to use the layer palette for certain things, and we're going to create a timeline. There are other programs that Adobe has made, After Effects and a new animation editor, but I don't want you to have to learn a new program, so instead we're going to borrow them from the Photoshop features of this, because Photoshop started adding the animation timeline more than 10 years ago, and in so doing, each of the new programs they've built were kind of built on that technology. So in essence, if you can animate something in Photoshop, you can actually already know how to use some of those newer programs without having to install them. So to get started, I'm going to go ahead and first of all, I'm going to click on my Photoshop document, and I'm going to hit Command 0 just so I can enlarge it to fill the screen. It'll be easier for me to do some of my precursor steps that I need to do to get going on this. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do what we always do in a Photoshop document, which is come in here and grab the background layer, and I'm going to drag it down onto this new layer icon that either looks like a post-it note or a plus symbol. I'm going to drag it down, so now I've got 2 copies of that. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to double click on this background, this name background copy to, and I'm going to type in the word fixed. Just because we're going to start to have a bunch of layers, at some point you're going to want the names on some of them. After I've done that, we're going to go back and access the mask that I've already made for her. Because if I turn these eyeballs off, I've already cut her out for you. I was going to have you do it, but then I started to realize just how complicated it was, and it took me 15-20 minutes to go around her fingers. I don't think that's worth it for us to do. But what I have to do is I have to get her off the layer with the mask. So to do that, if I move over onto the layer palette, I'm going to end up having my cursor turns into a big foam We're number 1 finger. If I hover that above the mask, and I add the command button, it's going to add a little teeny marching ant box. I'm holding the command on and off so that you can see that. By doing that, if I click on top of the mask, it'll automatically make the marching ants around my mask feature. That way I don't have to do this multiple times, or I don't have to come back out and cut her again. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move back to the fixed layer. And I'm going to come up here to where it says edit. I'm going to pull down to copy. Then I'm going to pull down to edit, and I'm going to pull down to where it says paste. And now it's putting a whole copy of her all by herself without the mask on it anymore on a whole separate layer. Now that I've done that, I no longer need my masked layer anymore. So I'm going to go ahead and grab it and drag it down to the trash can. So again, now this is what I have left. I still have her cut out, but she's all by herself on a different layer. Next thing I'm going to do is I have to fix the hole in the background, because if she's still on this fixed layer that I haven't fixed yet, And so it's going to be, I'm going to have two copies of her. What I basically need to do is separate her so that she's only on layer 3, which I'm going to go ahead and call girl. And I'm going to go ahead and try to remove her from the fixed layer. So to do that, once again, I hold down the command button and I click on top of where she's cut out. So I'm clicking on the girl icon, bang, open the layer palette. Now I'm going to go ahead and move my cursor back so I'm on the fixed layer. Then I'm going to go up to where it says select, modify, and let go on expand. I'll bet that the standard pops to 12, and I'm going to tell you that it depends on the resolution of your picture, but in this case 12 is going to be just fine. Click OK. Now it has gone ahead and it has enlarged the size of the background, because what the next step I'm going to try to do, I would never try to do it exactly on her outline, or I'm going to see a very big smudge. Now I'm going to go up to edit, and I'm going to pull down to fill, and I'm going to change the contents from foreground color or black and white to content aware. And then I'm going to click OK. You're not going to see much of anything happen, but and then I'm going to hit Command D, or I'm going to go up to select and pull down to deselect. By doing this, if I hide the girl, you'll see what it did. It filled in the background. Now it had to make a lot of guesses. Like this building, we have no idea if that building was there. She was covering it up. Same thing with any of this stuff in here. So what it did was it saw a building and it put it in the background. It saw this structure and it went ahead and it made it 2 copies of it. It went ahead and it saw this kind of detail and it said, well, I'll try to do that too. Now it's a little bit wavy in here. You could always come back and clone it if it was really important, and it's wavy down here too. But here's the thing. This is like a magician's trick. Your eye is going to be so focused on the movement between her and the background that as long as this background is reasonably filled up, you're going to be just fine. I'm going to go back and click on girl. This looks great. Now I need to add a couple more features before I move on and get ready to go ahead and actually do the timeline work. It's suggested that you add as many layers as you think you're going to need right now before you turn it into the timeline mode and start to animating, but we can add them after the fact. So for example, I'm going to leave the button and the button text as if we forgot it until after we're already animating. So what I need now is I need that background green color. So I'm going to click on the new layer icon. I'm not dragging anything to it because I truly do want a new layer. Click on it. Then I'm going to move over to the foreground color. Click on that color. Let's go ahead and enter the green that I gave you off of your instruction sheet. Come down to the bottom right corner with the CMYK, which is basically blue, pink, yellow, and black. Cyan of 60, magenta of 10, yellow of 60, black of 10. It's going to make this kind of sage green color, 60, 10, 60, 10. Then I click OK. That's now established on the foreground color. While I'm still on this blank layer number 3, I'm going to go up to where it says Edit, and I'm going to pull down to Fill. And I'm going to make sure that this changes. It probably will jump automatically to foreground color, but set it for the foreground color. Click OK. One more thing I need to do is on the color thing, it says Fill Set to 70. So I move over here while I'm still on this layer, and I find this thing a little bit above it and to the right. I'm going to grab the caret, and I'm going to slide this over until where it says it's at 70%. So it's going to be semi-transparent. That's great. I also notice that ultimately I'm going to need that underneath the girl for some of my animation feature. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this down and let it go underneath girl. I might as well just go ahead and get it in the right place right now. So I've got my original background, which is not going to be on the timeline because it's locked, so it won't show up. I've got my fixed layer. Why don't I go ahead and call this green? I've got my girl. Excellent. Let's go ahead and make a type layer. Before I go to make the type tool, use the type tool though, right now it's going to make the type whatever color the foreground is. I don't need green type on top of a green background. I just tried to make this very simple. Click on the foreground color, or click on these 2 little teeny boxes, the black and white default foreground and background colors thing, and pop it. It'll put black on top. Go get the text tool. As soon as you use the text tool in Photoshop, it's going to create a whole new text layer. So I'm going to just click up here, and I'm going to go ahead and type my headline, which is conscious, period, living, period, peace, period. And I'm going to go ahead and hit Command A to highlight all, and I'm going to hit Command T to pop up the character box. I want this to be Helvetica bold. And according to the instruction sheets, it's 24 with a leading of 28. Type size, this one with the T's. This one showing the arrows between the lines is 28. I might as well go ahead and change this feature here, which is its built-in kerning, to optical. And I'm not going to bother to kern anything else on this. That's great. So that's one text block. Now I'm going to go get the text tool. I need to make sure I don't click on top of the current one, or it's going to go ahead and attach itself to that one. If I click down here, boom, I can immediately look over on the layer palette. It's calling it the new layer 3 until I fill it in with some text. I've got a new text layer. So now I'm going to go ahead and type in can happen anywhere. And then if I need to hit the return button after the word happen. Command A, change this from Helvetica bold to Helvetica regular. Change the type size to 20, the leading to 24. And once again, let's change the kerning to optical. Now I need to move these, so go get the move tool. What I need to do is move this so it's positioned about like this. Doesn't matter exactly. Not right on the top left corner of the page, down a little bit, almost as if her middle finger is kind of pointing at it. And I'd like to adjust this so that the top and the bottom have about the same distance. And then I'm going to go ahead and grab my text and I'm going to position it fairly similarly. So it's lined up. When I get close to it, it's going to actually draw a pink box to help me ensure that I actually am lining it up with the text above. And then again, I'm just going to use the arrow keys or the cursor, moving around and so that the space down toward the bottom is about the same as that. But I'm not looking for anything precise on that. I'm done with the type palette for now, so I'm going to click that fast forward button to remove it. And in taking a look at this, I think I'm actually ready with those extra components to say, let's go ahead and start to make the animation or use the timeline feature. To do this, you have to remember to create things as smart objects. It makes all the animation features work so much better if you do this. The neat thing is, though, type is already a smart object, so I don't have to mess with those. To do this, I have to turn the logo on, even though I'm going to hide it temporarily. So I'm going to start at the top, or use my scroll bar here and just go down the steps. Turn the eyeball on layer 2, click on it. Go to the hamburger icon for layer 2, and pull over and let go and convert to smart object. And then as soon as I've done that, I'm going to turn the eyeball off on that one again. I'm going to click on the girl. I'm going to go to the hamburger icon. I'm going to go to convert to smart object. Every time I make something a smart object, it puts this little icon down over here. So I did that with the logo, which again, I had to remember to do by turning the logo on first. Then I can slide on down here. I'm going to go past the type. I'm going to do this to my green layer. Click on the green layer, convert to smart object. Go to my fixed layer, convert that to smart object. And now that I've done that, I don't need to bother doing it to the background because the background with the lock on it is never added to the timeline or the animation feature anyway. Cool. Now I'm ready to go ahead and make the timeline. I go up to Window and I pull down to Timeline. Now there's two options down here. One is to just go ahead and click this Create Video Timeline if that's your default. There is another option down here, Create Frame Animation. That is 20-year-old technology. That's how the original GIFs were made, animated GIFs were made. We don't want that. We want to leave this on the more advanced Create Video Timeline, which is how all the new programs work. So I click on this. And as soon as I do that, I'm going to basically see a representation of my layers over here. My original layers are still here, but these layers are the separate components or tracts. There's an audio track that it automatically tosses in, but it's not going to add music behind it unless we turn that on. This is just to say that every one of these things is like a separate video or audio track that I could work from. Neat. One other thing I probably want to do is I could always change how much space this is taking up by grabbing up here at the top until I see this kind of up and down arrow, but I want as much of this showing as possible. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hit Command minus, so that I can see my entire object. I'm not going to be making any precise movements on here for quite a while anymore, so it's fine for it to be this small. I want these to be as big as possible. Now, if I'm looking down here, here's my timeline. This is my playhead. It is controlled by these buttons right in here for rewinding, fast forwarding, playing, and things like that. Or I can manually always grab it by grabbing this huge blue button. If I look at my timeline, it's controlled by this little mountain and big mountain. That's what most people call it in the video. That's the viewscape of how much of this you're seeing. Well, right now, there's 30 frames in a video per second. So what it's saying is this is 0, this is 1 second, this is 2 seconds, this is 3:00F, that's 3 seconds. My stops in between are 10F, 20F, that's 10 frames or a third of a second, 20 frames is 2/3 of a second, and then boom, there's 1 second, 1 second, 10 frames, 1 second, 20 frames, 2 seconds, and so on. If for some reason you want, you could always scroll this around. We could zoom in all the way until we actually saw every single thing frame by frame, 1F, 2F, 3F, 4F. But that probably means my document would be 4 or 5 yards wide. I don't want that. So I'm going to move this on back. As long as I got, but I don't want to shrink it down until I just see 15F. Now I'm only looking at half of a frame or half of a second at a time. I just want to make sure that I can still see 10F, 20F, 1 second, 10F, 20F, 2 seconds, and so on. What this is saying is Photoshop has automatically built me, I'm going to use the scroll bar down here, 5 seconds. Neat, but that's not what I really want. Well, one thing I know is the girl is going to last on every single frame. So I'm clicking on the girl layer in my timeline, not over in here in my layer palette. The girl layer in my timeline. I'm going to grab the right edge. I get this really weird pitchfork icon, and I'm going to move it to the right. And it's only going to let me go a little bit at a time. So once I moved it over to 7 something and let go, it now will let me go back and grab this and slide it over. And as I'm moving close to I'm trying to get it to 8 seconds. Right now mine's saying 7:27, 7:28, 7:29, 8. And then it's going to drop to 8 seconds 1 frame, 8 seconds 2 frame. I want to let go on this at 8:00. The nice thing is that once I've established this kind of line, any other thing that I grab on over is going to go ahead and want to snap to that. So it makes it pretty easy to do alignment. And as I'm doing this, I realize that I got some of these layers out of order. So I'm going to move the girl down until she's on top of the green. So that again, if I was to look at my layers, it's fixed green girl. Then it's my type. And then on top of it is my layer 2, which is my logo. So for right now, I'm going to go ahead and turn the logo on. Let's go ahead and attack that next, which is just called layer 2 is where my logo is. I'm going to go ahead and say the logo is also going to end at 8 seconds. The green is also going to end at 8 seconds, as long as I'm already over here. But for right now, those are the only 3 things. Green, girl, and layer 2, which is really my logo, are the only things that end at 8 seconds. Now I'm going to slide all the way back on over here. So let's do some really basic timeline looking by looking at that major timeline moments. The first thing I said is girl and background and movement at 2 seconds, 10 frames. Or we're going to just leave that for now. Green begins at 2:20. Well, let's just go ahead and do this. I'm going to grab the left edge of my green after I've slid all the way back here to my starting point. And I'm going to slide it over until I get to 2:20. Then I'm going to go ahead and headline and text headline enters at 3 seconds, text enters at 3:10, and then they both disappear at 5. Okay, so I'm going to grab my headline, Conscious Living Peace, move it over so that it starts at 3. I'm going to move my Can Happen Anywhere over until it starts at 3:10. And then I'm going to scroll on the list. Logo arrives at logo begins entry at second 5. So I'm going to slide this over. I'm going to have to probably use the scroll bar. I don't want my logo to appear until second 5. And then I'm going to also look down, when do things disappear? Well, the logo starts at 5 and it stays till 8. My text headline starts at 3 and it ends at 5. Oh, cool. It's already there because it automatically stopped there because that was the starting distance from Photoshop. So I decided to just leave it. Going to go ahead and have my can happen anywhere. My body copy start at 310. It also ends at 5. I'm also going to go ahead and look back along here. Background ends, that's really my fixed thing, at 3 seconds and 20. I'm making some of my major movements now before I do anything else. 3:20. All right. Now I'm going to just come on up here. I could scroll through this manually by moving the playhead, or while it's set on 0, I can just hit the play button. So my green at 3, my text pops in just afterwards, my logo shows up. Yep, for right now, this is what I need it to do. So I'm going to I can either manually slide the playhead back to 0, or I could hit this button on my playhead options to return it to 0. Okay, let's go ahead and start doing our parallax 2.5D effect. This is in some ways the most complicated part of it. And by doing that, what I need to do is start off by clicking on the fixed title. There's a little caret beside each of these. I'm only going to need to do this on the fixed and the girl because I want more advanced options than just entering and then changing the fade speed on some of those. So I'm going to click the fixed caret open over here. And now I see this transform button. By the way, if we'd have not made this object a smart object before we started, there would be no transform button here, which is going to drastically limit your ability to do any type of animation. I'm going to go ahead and open up the caret for the girl as well, because I think we'll start off by going on her. So after I've got the girl caret open, I'm going to click on the girl layer in the timeline so that she has this white kind of line all the way around the edge. That means Photoshop knows what we're talking about right now. The first thing I want to do with the playhead set to 0 is I want to click this watch beside this transform. Bang. As soon as I do that, it leaves a yellow dot here, and it also leaves a yellow dot over here. Now I'm going to move this thing over. It says girl and background in movement at 210. So I'm going to slide my playhead over here to 210. Stop. And then I'm going to go ahead and I need to make a new transform diamond. So this time, instead of when you're making the second transform function on a line, you don't hit the watch again. Instead, you click this little diamond that's separated by these two arrows. So I click and it leaves me a second diamond. It makes the first one gray and it makes this one yellow, which means I am active. What do you want me to do right now? So what I want us to do right now is go up to where it says edit and pull down to free transform. And I'm going to hold the shift button down to lock her so that I don't accidentally do this to her. I'm going to hold her down and I'm going to move this up, and I'm going to move it up until we're at, let's just go ahead and make it up to about 115. I am looking up at these two numbers up here to keep an eye on it to make sure she moved up to 115. Now keep in mind, because this is making minute transitions, it is very possible that right now this is saying 114 by 0.9 by 114.69. It's not actually doing that. As long as I held the shift button down, it just doesn't know how to be able to scroll both those numbers at the same speed. So in a way, I enlarged her up and to the right, basically about 15%, 15%. And then I have to hit the return button to actually activate that. So what I can see what I've done here is, if I move the playhead back to 0, I've said at second 0, I wanted her to be normal. But at this point, she's going to transition in between, get her to 115. So slowly between these two things, ramp her up to that size, and then if I just moved over, she's staying at that speed the entire rest of the time, because I don't have any. She has nowhere else to go after this transform. I'll turn my background layer off. I can see that starting to pop up. Okay, now as long as I'm still at 210, I'm going to move down to the fixed layer, which is again my background. I'm going to click on the background layer right here, boink, to make sure that I get the white line surrounding it so that I know which one I'm talking about. Again, I am making sure that my playhead is at 210. On this one, I'm going to do the exact opposite. She went bigger from the beginning to the end. The background is going to shrink to this point. So this is my end destination. So again, I'm on the fix layer. I hit the transform button once. Now I slide this back all the way to the very beginning. And what I need to do right now is I need to click another transform diamond, not the word transform or the stopwatch, but the diamond right beside it on my fix layer. I go back up to where it says edit. I pull down to free transform. This time what I want you to do is not just hold the shift button down to constrain it so that we don't squash the picture, but also add the option button. This means grow from the middle. And I want you to go ahead and enlarge this. Let's say pull it up to 130. I'm looking again up at my W and my H's. I want to pull that up until it's about 130%. Let go of the mouse first so she doesn't accidentally stretch. Let go of the option and the shift. I was never holding the command button on that one, and hit return. And right now I can hit play and I'm going to see my parallax 2.5D effect. My background is going to shrink down to its original size. She's going to start at her original size and she's going to grow 15%. Cool. So if that's all you wanted to do, you're done. Do not worry. The first couple times that Photoshop starts scrolling along, previewing the timeline, things can look very, very herky-jerky. The more times you hit the playhead, the smoother the transitions become, and that doesn't affect it. When I go ahead and export this to a video, it's going to look smooth no matter what anyway. So I'm in good shape here. I have already done this. Now what I need to do is I want my green to kind of fade in. So the one thing I'm doing, I'd originally established where the green was going to become. So what I want to do is I want to start to add a bunch of fades. This will just speed up the process quite a bit. This is the fade command right here. It's right after the scissors. It's this black and white box. I'm going to click on it. I don't know what your default is, but I'm going to change for this one duration or fade. I'm going to change it to a half a second, so 0.5. As soon as I've done that, I'm going to grab the word fade and I'm going to pull the word fade down and I'm going to drop it on the beginning of the green. And it's going to leave me this ramp. So if I want to see, and then I can just click anywhere over here to get rid of the fade thing from popping up all the time. If I slide this thing over, instead of the green box just appearing, right here is where it starts to appear, but it's going to slowly fade in, and after half a second, it's going to get to its end point, which is awesome. Now the other thing that I'm going to go ahead and set quarter-second fades for several other things. I might as well just move my playhead manually back to the beginning. So what I'm going to do there is I need to have the building fade out because at this point, this looks weird. My animation, my green starts to fade in, then all of a sudden, boom, the background disappears all at one big jump. So in doing that, what I need to do is go get the fade command again, but this time I'm going to change the duration to 0.25. And that's what it's going to use for the rest of these. I'm going to grab the fade and I'm going to drop it at the end of the fixed line. So it's going to fade out. So now I'm going to get a smoother transition when I do this. The building is going to go ahead and fade out. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to move on up here. Let me put quarter-second fade ins and outs on my text. I'm going to click on the fade button. I'm going to slide over, drop it at the beginning of my headline. Grab the fades, drop it on the beginning of Can Happen Anywhere, with my duration being set for a quarter. Scroll over to the right a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and drop a fade command at the end of the headline. And I'm going to drop it at the end of my text. So let's scroll back and see what I have going on. I'm going to hit play. I am not going to worry about what's happening to the girl with her kind of blinking on and off. That's probably just me taking so long to make this video that things are kind of freaking out, at least with the screen preview. So I'm reasonably close, at least at the beginning, for what I want things to look like. I get my parallax 2.5D effect. My green starts to come in. My text starts to appear at slightly different speeds. My building starts to fade out. At some point, my text is going to start to fade away, and my logo is going to start to appear. All right, but rather than just having the logo fade on in, I'm manually moving my playhead over until I'm pretty near the logo at this point. Now what I need to do is go ahead and change how my logo is going to come in. Rather than having it fade, I'm going to actually have it move. So what I'm going to do on it is I'm looking back at my list of timeline moments. My logo arrives at the destination at 5:20. I'm sorry, I take the back. I'm going to have to open the caret up for this one. I'm going to move my playhead to 5:20. Then I'm going to open up the caret for that particular layer. I'm going to click on the layer to make sure that's where I'm at. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click the watch to add my first transform dot. Makes me a yellow diamond. I'm going to move it back and drop the playhead right at the beginning at 5 seconds where the logo appears. I'm going to hit a diamond. So now I have 2 underneath the yoga logo. With the second one really being the first one, the second one I made, or the first one being at the beginning being yellow. I'm going to go up to edit. I'm going to pull down to free transform. But in this case, rather than doing any sizing, what I'm doing is I'm taking this and I'm sliding it to the right. I'm also going to add the shift button so it moves in a perfectly horizontal line. I'm moving it far enough off to the page until it's sitting here like this. Letting go and hitting return. And before I hit return, what that's doing is it's saying the logo is going to start here off the page at 5 seconds, but by 5:20, it's going to arrive where it needs to be. Ta-da! That's what it's going to do. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to might as well find the girl. The girl begins her move at 4:20. So I'm going to scroll on down until I come back down to the girl line, and I'm going to click on the girl purple line so that she gets the white border around it so I know that it's active. Going to move the playhead back to where it says 4:20. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and click a transitional dot here. At this point, she's going to start to move, and she's going to finish her move at 5:10. At 5:10, I've moved the playhead over. I again come back over here. I do not hit the word transform or the stopwatch. Again, when it's the second or more time on a line, I end up having to oops, computer is freezing there just a little bit. I'm going to have to come on back and I'm going to have to hit that diamond thing. I'm going to pause the video here since I seem to be running out of memory on my computer real quick. Okay, now we're back again. So again, I set my first button for the girl at 4:20. Now I'm setting another one here for her at 5:10. And I'm going to click the diamond again. What I'm doing here is I had to make this diamond to pretty much say I wanted her to stay in the same place, but at her here, I need her to start to do something. Now that I've got the diamond set at 5:10, I'm going to again go up to edit, free transform. I'm going to grab her, push and hold. I'm going to hold to the, I'm holding the shift button down and I'm sliding her to the left. And I'm moving her just toward the edge. Don't have her fingers running off the edge, but at this point I don't really care exactly where you put her. Let go. When you're done, you have to hit the return button. Okay, again, what this is doing is saying while she was here, she's still staying in place, but at this moment is when she can start to do something to get to here. If I had not hit this one here, she would have been constantly moving on this timeline from this point all the way to here. So this one's really not doing anything. It's just reminding you she's staying, this is where she stopped growing. Don't do anything with her until here. But between here and here, do the last thing that you asked it to do. So she's going to start, the type's going to start to fade out. She's going to start to move. And the logo is going to slide on over. Excellent. We're down to really only a couple of other things. One thing that's bothering me is this gray and white checkerboard. So I'm going to come back over here to the new layer icon. And I'm going to come down here and I'm going to click on the word fixed. Back in the layer icon. I'm going to make a new layer. And then when I do that, I'm going to go up to Edit, and I'm going to pull down to Fill. And I'm going to tell it to fill with white. And then I'm going to click OK. And as long as I've got that positioned, I can even move it underneath the word fixed. It's pretty much my bottom active layer above my locked original background. Now I need to go find this layer 3. And I need to go ahead and make sure that it shows up all the way from the beginning. And then it runs all the way to the end. Oops, except it went way too far. It went out to 11 seconds or something. So I need to pull it back so that everything ends at 8 seconds. Okay, now that I've done that, excellent. That way I'm just not seeing the faded green anymore on top of the transparent color. I get to see the true color of the green. Last thing I need to do is I need to add the button. And let's just pretend, oops, I forgot to add this up until this point. No worries. I'm going to come on over here to my layer palette, and I might as well just go ahead and add them on top. So I'm going to click on top of my layer 2, which is the top one. And I'm going to go get the text tool. And I'm going to go ahead and flip this so that I've got, by hitting this little switch button, so that I have white on the foreground. Or you could click on whatever color's on the foreground, slide these triangles all the way to the top, or enter 0000 at the CMYK boxes to make sure that you had white. And I'm going to just click somewhere down here, and I'm going to type in all caps. For some reason, that's what we do when we are typing things on a button. I'm going to type book a lesson. Hit Command A to select all. Hit Command T. Change that to be Helvetica bold. Change this so that it's 10 point. It doesn't matter what the leading is because there's not a second line, so who cares what the leading is? Go ahead and I guess set this to optical anyway. And now that I've got that, I'm just going to position this wherever it is. Then I'm going to go hit the switcheroo button, and I'm going to switch it so that the color black is on top. Now if I wish to start to draw something here, it's going to attach it to the text layer. So I need to make a new layer. Boink. And I just go ahead before I do anything and call it button. And now I'm going to take the rectangle tool, which is in the second set of tools. Remember, it might be set up as an ellipse, so you might have to push and hold on that and get to rectangle, with black being your foreground color. And I'm going to try to draw a box slightly bigger than the book a lesson. And then I'm going to go up to Edit, and I'm going to pull down to Fill, and I'm going to make sure that that says black, or the foreground color. And now I have to move the book a lesson text on top of the button. And if for some reason you didn't get that really evenly spaced out, my suggestion is to click on the text layer and you could just tap the arrow keys if for some reason you didn't think it was all that well centered. Last thing I want to do over here before I add my last animation feature is I need to move those two things. If I want to grab more than one layer at a time in Photoshop or any Adobe program, I hold the Shift button down. So I click on the text layer, book a lesson, I hold the Shift button down and I click on button. And now they both have a highlight bar on them. Great. And again, I could grab with the top move tool, or you could just tap your arrow keys. I'd like you to position this so that the right edge is kind of lined up underneath the vertical stroke of this A, and that you're floating it so it's about halfway between the bottom of the G in yoga and the bottom of the screen. Just get it reasonably close is fine with me. Now, once again, I'd established that where does my button appears? My button enters at second 6. So I go back down here, back to my timeline, and I grab this and I move this to the beginning to say second 6. My button text enters at 6:10. Well, it turns out I believe that's pretty much where it had added it. If for some reason it's not letting you grab close, like it's making me hop between 6:08 and 6:11, that's because the playhead's too close and it's magnetic and it's thinking you're wanting to attach it to it. So I'm going to come back here and grab this, and I'll have an easier time getting this start to set to second 6. I'm going to go ahead and click on the fade command to pull the box up. I'm going to fade my button, and I'm going to fade my book a lesson. I'm going to use the scroll button down here. I'm going to scroll back over to the right. Again, it accidentally, because I added it after the fact, it made it too long. So I'm going to pinch these back to second number 8. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and hit the rewind button on the playhead all the way to the beginning. Let's take a quick peek. There's my parallax 2.5D effect. Green pops in. It's doing what it needs to do. This is all looking good. My button appears and everything stops at second 8. Cool. I asked you to do one last thing, and that's to make the button flicker. We're going to make it flicker between 6:20, 6 and 20 frames, or 6 and 2/3 seconds, and 7. So I'm going to click on the button line. I'm going to come over here to the caret that says button. I'm going to click to open this. I do not see the word transform. That's because it's not a smart object. Ah, that's right. I added it after the fact. So I come over here and click button in my original layer palette, hamburger icon, convert to smart object. I'm going to close this caret, reopen the caret for the button. Yep, there's my word transform. Again, I do not need to do this for the book of lesson text because text is already a smart object. Make sure I'm on the button layer. I'm going to move my playhead to 620. I'm going to click the transform stopwatch once. I'm going to move the playhead to 7. I'm going to click the diamond, again, not the stopwatch, but click the diamond on that. And then I'm also going to pick a spot, I want you to visually gauge this, halfway in between 620 and 7. So I guess it's like it's 625, but don't worry about being precise and add one more dot. What this is doing is saying the button is going to enter here, it's going to stay the same till here. The other gray one, it's going to go back to the original size and stay there. I need to make the button larger. So while I'm on this middle diamond of the button, I go up to Edit, Free Transform. I'm going to hold down Option and Shift, not Command, Option to keep it from in the center, and Shift to hold a proportion. I'm going to enlarge the size of it, looking up at my W and H. Well, we've already used the number 15% once before. Let's do the same thing. Get it close to 15% larger. Let go of your buttons. When you're done, remembering to let go of the mouse button first, then the Option and Shift. Then hit Return. And now we can move the playhead back a little bit to see what it did. Okay, so manually, button shows up. Text appears or fades in. Button keeps staying the same size, but it blips up on that middle dot, and then it returns to the normal size. So it just flickers slightly. Pretty common with the button. I'm going to hit rewind, spacebar, and I'm going to watch the whole thing. Excellent. Then I'm going to go up to File, and I'm going to pull down to Save As. Why don't you call it your name, and then the word yoga, which is going to want to save it as a Photoshop format. Excellent. Leave the maximize compatibility. Then I want you to go up to where it says File, and you need to pull down to Export. You can't just send someone the layered Photoshop file. You want to go up to File, Export, and pull down toward the bottom where it says Render Video. It's going to go ahead and keep the name that you typed in, your first name in yoga, put an MP4 at the end of it. We just want to make sure that the format is H.264 and the preset is high quality. So that means I shouldn't have to adjust anything in here, and then we just hit render. And depending on how much RAM is on your laptop, this could take 10 seconds. It could take up to a minute to do. And as soon as it's done, I'm going to go ahead and go back to my Finder. And I'm going to find that particular video and open it up. And you can scroll it to be whatever size, but obviously it's not built for that size. It's really built for about this size. And you can hit play. And any jerkiness that you were seeing in Photoshop should be replaced at this point. Again, that was just because of the Photoshop rendering the screen preview type thing. And at that point, you're going to turn in both your layered Photoshop file and your rendered video. And that's how to do basic animation in Photoshop.